Hey everybody. So we're doing the study group for the Healing Spirit 2.0, and let's open it up to shares or questions. Keep in mind that for myself, I consider this one of my deeper forms of psychological healing, psychotherapy, self-psychotherapy. And we have actually a few different practitioners who are using the seven oils, so the different healing spirits with their clients and getting very good results. And so, we move past looking at things from just a symptom oriented approach and looking at it from a point of view of how we're thinking or the kind of consciousness that we are tapping into, right? And so, anyway, I talked about it a lot over the weekend. I just want to remind. But anyway, go ahead and unmute yourself or type in, and then with the time we have left, we'll go through and we'll do a process.
All right, I think you might want to start leading us.
No shares or questions? Okay, so how about we go to,
Oh, wait, just kidding. Sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
hey, Dan.
Hey, sorry, I just missed I just stepped out and stepped back in. But hey, let's see here. Yes. This morning, okay, so working the healing spirit. I was going through a session today of just like every thought kind of invoked a feeling like just almost like super sensitive. And it's just like a feeling, thought, feeling, emotion, thought, feeling, emotion, thought, feeling, emotion, just like that. It's kind of got uncomfortable.
Okay.
So would like the moon, working the moon, work for that, or Saturn?
Actually, you know what would probably be a good one to work there is Mars.
Mars.
Like, the thing with Mars is like there's times where we are going inward and there's times where we're going outward. And I would say, the lower aspect of Mars is directed outwardly and is like maybe a little bit aggressive or abrasive. But the more intuitive aspect of Mars is still about going outward, being dynamic, problem solving, overcoming obstacles. And if you look at what does that look like? Like if you go, okay, that's what Mars does, but how does Mars do that? Right. And, you know, I have my sensitive phases and I have my, I don't know what you'd call it. I don't want to say like thick skinned, but like where, external pushback doesn't really like phase me. There's times where it really phases me, and then there's times where I'm like, and it really kind of depends. And for there to be an outward expression and the ability to be dynamic and overcome obstacles and like to break down walls, we can't be that sensitive. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
so it's more like you're evoking something rather than like because we all have it in us. We all have it in us. But we don't always, we kind of are firing from a place that maybe is not sensitive or too sensitive or sensitive in a different area. And so again, it's not about like trying to like treat a symptom, but it's like, okay, how do I want to be? What is the kind of like uniform I want to put on? Do I want to go
All
inward
right.
and be very reflective, or do I want to like go outward and get stuff done and be dynamic? That would be Mars. And so it's not even like you're evoking something outside of yourself. It's in you. You're just going and waking it up. I mean, that's all you're doing.
Okay.
And so
All
you're
right.
fanning the flame of something that resides in you. And so I would say use Mars to be like, I wouldn't say less sensitive, but because to overcome obstacles and break down walls and barriers, you still have to take information in, adjust, adapt. You still have to read the room and be sensitive. You know what I
Mm.
mean? But there's like it's like you take it in, but it doesn't go all the way to your bones. You go, okay, adjust, adapt. Like it comes in, so you're still being observant, but then you're just immediately going, now let's still move whatever it is like outward. And so, especially when you're trying to lay some kind of like framework or break down an old pattern, you know, Jupiter is very good for breaking down like blockages and patterns, but it has usually more to do with like our healing or our ability to prosper or to meet goals. Mars kind of has the vibe of like, okay, this is the way we used to do it. We're doing it different now.
Okay.
Or
Okay.
there's a new sheriff in town. Like the parameters are changing. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
there's
Right.
more of a like a oomph behind it.
Okay.
And
So that kind of dispels the fear aspect of it
it
then
dispels
as
the fear.
well.
And I would say, you know, Mars is very purifying. Like I would say it's purifying to the point of being liberating. So I would say, like in an inner
Huh.
practice, Mars has more to do with like liberation than anything. You're liberating out of, type of oppression or a pattern that you just, for whatever, just can't break out of it. But it's doing it through like kind of purifying like our emotions, our thoughts, our body conditioning, and it refines it in such a way that you're able to overcome obstacles because a lot of times the obstacles are like our inner resistances, our attachments, or I would say like even a sensitivity, like when I was younger, as soon as I would feel pushback on something, I was sensitive enough to where if I felt pushback, it would just shut me down. Like I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
just like,
I,
I
I
can't do it anymore.
knew that. Yeah. Yep.
And
Yep.
so Mars is the remedy for that. Like it's
Okay.
big time the remedy for that. And you know, I would say as soon as you start working it, it would be something that's noticeable, but over a period of time, you'll start to almost like conjure it up without even doing the oil process. And you can like depend on it. It's like, okay, it's my inner Mars time. And you just like bring it forth and it will start doing it. Like the more you work the different aspects, the more that they'll like self reinforce. And so it starts to become easier and easier to conjure it up inside of you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's good. That's
So
good.
here's the thing that I find very interesting. Like if I look at like old amulets and things,
Huh.
because all the different planets have, various amulets that are associated with it and mystical practices. And there's this one of in Mars that I just love this amulet. And it's a very simple amulet, but it has a couple of holy names. And one is the holy name for the heart, right? And so, when you think of Mars, you don't really think of the heart. You think of like the solar plexus or,
Right.
but it's the holy name of the heart, which is loving kindness. And
Right.
then it has the YHVH,
Okay.
which is a holy name. That's just the
Right.
abbreviation. And you could say that YHVH is like when you invoke it, when you're devotional to it, you're literally bringing down the blueprint of the divine, and you're trying to bring that blueprint down into the form. Like you're bringing down or manifesting the divine plan, or uh,
Hmm.
uh, yeah, the divine plan.
Okay.
And so in that you have loving kindness manifesting everything's in divine order or divine plan. And you're bringing it into the physical form. And so in a way, it's like it's a type of I wouldn't call it transmutation. I'd call it transfiguration. And it's
Hmm.
like when the divine comes in and changes the form. Transmutation is where we're transmuting things in our body to
And
be able
yeah.
to feel the divine. This is you're bringing down divine power, and you're like, this is going to change. This is
Okay.
going to change whether it
Okay.
likes it or not. You know what I
Okay.
mean?
Okay.
And much softer than Saturn. Much
Okay.
softer than Saturn.
Okay. Is that one of the 44 as well?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
oh, okay. Yeah. Very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I'll show
Very
those
good.
when we're there next week.
One, yeah. I
Yeah.
look forward. Yeah. Thanks. Oh, just a quick comment too on the other thing. When we were
Mhm.
working on the previous class for Michael, there was a big chunk of a blue I felt. And it's
Oh,
interesting.
nice.
I looked it up, what color is associated with Michael?
Uh,
And sure enough, blue and gold. So it was kind of very interesting. That was the
oh,
first
very nice.
intuitive. Yeah, it was that I always try to look for something intuitive when we start doing practices and stuff. And yeah, that was kind of cool. That was very neat. Yeah. Thank
Very
you.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Samantha said that was probably her favorite. Would you say your favorite to start class
Yeah, it's definitely on
Wednesday
my top.
session?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of lump them together because
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Thanks.
And then go ahead, Ralph, then Lolly.
Hey, hero.
Hey, Greg, got an oils question.
Gotcha.
What's the difference between the healing spirit oils and the premium oils for like the moon, Jupiter?
So the healing spirit is more about awakening like the consciousness or the activity associated with each of the planets, because it's a spirit. And the
Right.
spirit is also how you communicate with the elements. So it helps bring things into like manifestation. Like the regular planet and the like the premium planet is more of just like tapping into the energy itself of that. um you could call it like you're you're tapping into the boss of the healing spirit, if that makes sense. Like it's like a bigger aspect that's not so much about materialization, but you're just trying to get like your energy body conductive to it. You're activating something a little bit higher up. And so, the reason why we started with the planets is you're kind of bringing something down. And so that's one way of looking at it. Or another way of looking at it is you're not really bringing it down, but you're going deeper and deeper, like inward. And so the idea of working with a planet and the alchemical planet is the impure aspect of that planet. So it's like the planet and the alchemical planet is like giving you greater levels of like the building blocks of what you use when you use the healing spirit, if that makes sense.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Like Ralph, here's another way to look at it. You know how like when we think something, it's energy of thought. It's not a thought form, it's energy of thought. And if we think it repetitively enough or we have strong enough emotion, eventually it attracts energy from the environment and brings it into form. So there's a mixing of the energy of thought and then the elements from the earth that then come and mix and like bring it into form. Think of like the planet and then the healing spirit of the planet as like the energy of thought and then bringing that earth energy and mixing it. It's not so much the earth energy, but it's in that vibe of that.
Mhm.
And you're creating this, it's not really a thought form, but it's a kind of consciousness that you're waking up in a person. And so it's kind of the same idea, but on a bigger scale, like a high, or I should say a higher scale.
Okay, great.
Like the different planets, you know, we think of our mind as like I think something, and maybe I'm intellectual or maybe I'm intuitive, but even within that, there's different ways of thinking. You know, like here you're using the idea of the planets to identify the different ways or different aspects of thinking. You know, like how when you're at work, you think a particular way. When you're home at night resting, you're thinking a different way. Sunday morning, you think a different way. You know, mowing the lawn and you're thinking a different way. You know, you're with friends, you're thinking a different way. You're with your Uncle Bob at some, you know, family thing. You think different ways. And we think of it as just like, this is the way I think, but there's all these little nuances within that. And so it's like tapping into those each separate different ways of thinking. Sometimes it might be very creative. Sometimes it might be very, sometimes it might be very soft and loving. You know, they're all there. It's just that we're not always very good at tapping into each one of them. And so the the planets help you to identify what that is, and the healing spirit helps you to tap into it and wake it up. It's
Okay.
almost like getting the idea working with the planets, like, oh, this is the sun. This is a way of thinking, you know, and even how we think of the days of the week or how we think of each of the energies, it's really about trying to get the idea of what that is. Because like your mind just, you know, it just doesn't take to it right off the bat. Like you have to have kind of exposure for a while. You know, it's like that thing in sales, like you gotta say something 3 or 5 or 8 times, whatever it is, for the person for it to start sinking in. So it's the same idea with like teachings where, you know, you do things with symbols, you do things with stained glass windows and paintings, and you do things with stories and fables and parables and it's not the direct technique or it's not the direct experience, but you're kind of keep getting the idea of like, oh, there's this thing. Like, oh, there's this thing. Like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. You kind of see a story that really is talking about chakras and the awakening of Kundalini, but you see it in a story and you're like, oh, there's something kind of there. But you're watching a little story and your mind gets a little bit closer to being able to go, oh, there's this thing. You know, there's this thing. So the idea of the planets is it's like it's an introduction to different parts of yourself. And then the healing spirit is putting it in motion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's dialing your radio into different radio stations.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's like the presets on, you remember the old
Is
like
it the presets or are we
yeah,
still
yeah.
turning the
The
dial?
planets are like you're getting used to it and you go, oh, okay, I've scanned all the radio. These are my presets. Right. Yeah. 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 I like that.
Okay.
And go ahead, Lolly.
Hey, Ollie.
Hey. So yes, the Star class was, oh my God, so amazing. So
Oh,
thank you so
good.
much. So good. Yes.
Good.
So what I'm wondering about the healing spirits. When we talked about it, I remember one of the weeks actually for the Q&A. Somebody asked about it, and then the connection between that and the five virtues. I think some people are familiar with that from PH. And you mentioned that you can actually work the spirits, and it's pretty much like the equivalent of working the five virtues, that it's kind of or similar
Yeah,
way.
it's not specifically going after, again, it's kind of going back to what I was just saying with like it's about how you're thinking. You know, when we think of the virtues, we're thinking like, okay, you know, accurate perception, correct expression, you know, like non-lying, whatever you
Mm-hmm.
call it.
Yeah.
You know, you would target that specifically with the intellect, but with intuition, it's more dialing in the way of thinking. So your mind just doesn't go there. You know, like at first you have like maybe a bit of an entanglement with a negative aspect of a virtue. And so, you know, you work it specifically going after it. And it's almost like how I was just talking about the planets with Ralph. Going after the negative tendencies or the opposite of the virtue doesn't really resolve it, but it increases your awareness of the problem so that you can address it to a much greater degree as your mind changes. You know, a really good example of this is if you grew up Catholic, you go into confession and you say, okay, I did this, I did that, you know, I did these things. And they send you out and they go, okay, say 100 Hail Marys and then say, you know, 10 Our Fathers, right? And so if you look at the ratio, it's like kind of a weird ratio, but okay. The Hail Marys are to increase your awareness. They don't resolve anything, but it makes your awareness much greater so that when you do the Lord's Prayer is what purifies and then cultivates the virtue of, you know, the centers, whatever that might be. But if you just do it without awareness, nothing really happens. So you have to keep doing awareness, 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 awareness. Then all of a sudden you go, oh, okay, I'm, you know, at first I said you know, I did this, I did that, you know, whatever it is. But as you reflect on it and you do all those Hail Marys, you know, it activates the heart, it activates the forehead, and you're like very aware of like, wow, I really did these things. And then you just do a few of the Lord's prayers and it kind of cleans and shifts. You know, it helps you to cultivate the virtue in that thing. It breaks down the tendencies. And so the same idea, like you kind of go after, like if you're working virtues, you can sit and, you know, think about the virtue, reflect on the virtue, you know, do whatever purification you want on the virtue. But at some point, going through and shifting like how you think, that's the thing that shifts it. But at first, you're really kind of cultivating an awareness of like, oh boy, I really have an issue here. You know, because you go, okay, accurate perception, correct expression. Oh, I'm totally good there. But then when you start examining it, you start going, yeah, I'm not that good at it. Like, you know, oh, you know, I got to work it a little bit. And so, you know, you go through and you do purifications, you do whatever disintegrations and things. It gets a bit better, but it doesn't get massively better. You know, it does get better, but sometimes if that person's not even ready, sometimes when they start to do the purifications, they'll get worse before they get better. And it's because you're intellectually becoming more aware of it. And then at some point, you're still doing it kind of from an intellectual point of view. And at some point you get frustrated and you're like, ugh, whatever it is. And at that point, you're at a crossroads. Do I completely ignore it or do I give up and try to do something different? And in that moment, you start to go more into the intuitive mind. So you're starting to become way more aware of it. Then when you start applying the practices, a lot of bang for the effort. You really start to shift things. And so, even when we do like healing work, you think of a past event, you think of an active situation, you think of this person. What you think about in those situations isn't it as important as you just connecting to them to kind of bring the awareness up. And then in it, we do the intuitive processes where as that arises in your mind, as it arises in your consciousness, you have a pattern of how you react. You have a pattern of how you behave. And then when you focus and you start to bring in the intuitive mind starts to overcome that obstacle or deal with that issue. And so, like even the aspect of the virtues, same idea. Doesn't matter what it is. Could be work,
Okay.
could be the virtues, could be karma, could be a relationship, could be how to improve, how to do something. Doesn't matter what it is.
So basically, which I like that because one of the things is, yeah, when it gets to intellectual and something is not really feels like it's moving for me, doing the work with you, I realize that's why, because I'm so much in my intellect and I try to
Right.
clear out something that
And
it's
we
not
start coming up
intellectual.
with like reasons and excuses, and then there's little dramas, like, there's like the
It
intellect
is,
does all kinds of weird things. And so, you
and
know, we'll, and it's not like some people do and some people don't. It's the nature of intellect. Like it is
and
just what intellect does. And so if it's left in intellect, it'll make something up. It'll say, well, this is what this is, and I've resolved it. And you really haven't. But, you go like, I've resolved it, and then, a good example is people go, okay, I'm reborn in Christ. But then you watch their behavior.
okay.
I don't know, that's pretty sketchy. But they verbalized it, and in their mind, they've made a decision.
Mhm.
And it's kind of goes back to what I was saying, I don't know, a few weeks ago is the intellect thinks it's the source of everything. It thinks it's the one that calls the shots and makes things happen. It doesn't. It doesn't make anything happen. It maintains things. That's all it does.
So okay, which and the explanation was really good. So thank you, because yeah, it got to a point of also like, okay, kind of doing it is something that I feel like I'm not really doing it. Like you said, like phoning it in sometimes, and I'm like, what am I even doing here? When
Yeah,
I'm
I
too much
mean,
in my intellect. Yeah, yeah. And
even if you look at like how we do the classes both at Ostara and here, um, I don't ever put forth like you need to do this on a schedule, repeated over and over and over again. Just go through the steps, it'll produce a result. Bec- It does for a little while, but then at some point, you kind of started to dance on the wrong foot. It's still about increasing your awareness for something, but at some point, you have to breathe life into that. And so, if you look at so many things, it's not that it's wrong. It's just that it's not the end all.
yeah,
It's
and,
just an opening of a door. It's not the full practice. It's just you're getting the mind used to something is all you're doing with technique. You're just getting the mind
and
used to something. And then once it's used to something, that's why you'll see people do a spiritual practice and then they're like, yeah, I'm kind of done. I bottomed out. I didn't really do anything is because at some point, at first you're like, oh, this is amazing. And then you get kind of used to it. And then there's no growth. There's no
Mhm.
expansion. There's no anything. So then you're like, got to find a different technique. And you go from technique to technique to technique to technique, always looking for that magic. And, the only magic that's really there is the newness. And when the newness wears off, then what? So in mystical practices, you don't really get the thing to hold on to of the repetition of the thing, of the practice or whatever. You kind of are having to go through and do a practice and have experiences, and you go, wait, what am I doing? And you keep going inward and you have these experiences, but you didn't get there with a technique. You just got it there by turning inward. And so the more you do that, when you come back to a technique, boom, you're automatically breathing some sort of life into something. And so that will animate techniques to a much greater degree. It's the difficulty is that mysticism is very hard to teach, you know, um, because our intellect wants details and wants technique and wants to, talk about it and read about it and know
Mhm.
what's going to happen and where's that's going to go. And, it's not for everybody. It's
Yeah.
for really kind of serious practitioners. And so,
So yeah, so thank you. All of that makes sense. And so okay, so working, so let's say I'm still, I want to work the healing spirits in connection to the five virtues. So then it's not going to be one, I'm not looking at
all
specific ones
seven,
to work.
all seven
It's all
have
okay,
an
okay.
impact on each one of the virtues.
Okay, and then
Yeah.
would that be, but the process, and then it's an intellectual question, but I still want to understand.
Mhm.
But then would you do, does it matter if you do, like, would you do the 2.0 process or would you do the original plus, or it doesn't matter?
You could do both, but I would probably do the 2.0.
Okay.
Yeah. And you can reflect on like a virtue, but you also I would say that can make it a little bit more specific, but just the act of working the healing spirits will be working the virtues whether you
What I want to,
it
okay.
that way. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Oh,
doing it no matter what. Yeah.
okay, thank you. Because I mean, realistically, it doesn't really matter what you call it. The end result is what here I'm,
Hmm. Hmm.
looking for. I don't need to know
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. Because
Yeah.
I want to
Because
cultivate
you're
something.
waking up a consciousness.
Mm-hmm,
You're improving a way of thinking, and it will start manifesting in areas that you didn't even think about before. But
mm-hmm,
like you'll notice that like, wow, in the old days I would have behaved different, or I would have acted different, or I would have, run away, or whatever, stressed out, and I'm being different here.
mm-hmm,
It would be the same with the virtues. It would be the same with the people in your family. It would be the same,
mm-hmm,
like, it doesn't really matter. I find that when something stirs me up, like say you go see your family and you're like, ugh, Uncle Bob, I would go back and I'd work one of the aspects, but you know, I don't know, like unless you're already stirred up before you go, I don't know that you need to do it before. Like if you're doing the practice, it's gonna be in motion already. But
mm-hmm,
like when it comes up, that's a time to like jump on something. Like, okay, I'm gonna work. Like Dan was like, okay, what about this oversensitivity and these things? It's like, okay, work Mars. Like, go through and work Mars. Um, but if we worked Mars 2 weeks from now, when all that's resolved, it would still have an impact. But it's like as things kind of arise and come up, it can be a little bit more specific to that situation. It's even the idea, the thing that I was going to have us do tonight is is we're going to work the healing spirit, but kind of how we do that thing where you go, okay, I'm going to feel it in the body, feel something in the body and then observe and then inhale it into the body, because even that is breaking up those neurological loops, be it trauma, behavior, things about the self, whatever it is. And, really what you're talking about working in, like here we're talking about the virtues, but we could be talking
Mhm.
about work, we could be talking about your family, we could be talking about a
Mhm.
relationship, right? Really what you're doing is you're saying, okay, there's these virtues, there's these ideas, these concepts of these virtues. How do I break out a repetition of how I'm interacting with these aspects, these goals, like loving kindness? I have maybe a certain level of loving kindness. I have a certain level of not having loving kindness. How do I break out of this repetition? So really that's what you're doing. So when it comes up in you in a situation, you can work it, but also you can reflect on it. But just doing the practice will do that as
Mhm.
well. So
Yes.
even if you're not aware of it, it will still address something.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you. That was super helpful. That's exactly what I needed to kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, to get like the deeper understanding of, but yeah, so thank you, thank you. Yes.
You're so welcome.
Okay, so I know I could ask you this privately, but in case it helps people. So like the printer today, I just got like so like intense. Is there a healing spirit? Or would it be?
Mercury?
Okay,
Mercury.
good thing that Mercury class is coming up.
Everything is okay with the printer? Or
Well,
we had a
we're-
moment.
Yeah, and it's just like my reaction in
Yeah,
those moments is just like so intense.
Yeah. Yeah. So like for her, like I would say almost that's like a PTSD
Yeah,
thing,
exactly.
because it was pretty bad there. Like that was a few months ago, but still, times have come up where you've handled it better and something didn't happen today, but there was a moment where it could have happened. And basically just shuts everything down. And so that would be the thing, Mercury, for that one.
Yeah, because I went back and I was like inhaling tarragon.
Yeah,
Just like
that's a good place to start.
Mercury healing.
Yeah.
That's what I was
Yeah.
wondering. Because
But yeah,
it
Mercury.
seems like that would it may be a little deeper, better. All right, I think we're all ready for a
Good.
practice.
Okay, so
Oh, a sec. Go ahead, Lolly.
hey,
Just a quick one to follow up on Sam's question. So let's say really working Mercury, but then working the other two oils as well, or would you just work Mercury by itself? Like, would you still do the zodiac and the refinement?
I would do the whole segment out of the 2.0.
Okay, so
But
each time you're working, yeah.
yeah, but like here we're gonna do like if you need a quick fix or a quick, we're just gonna do the thing where we fill it in the body. So that could be even a different version of it.
Okay, okay, thank you. I was just wondering because it was really helpful question, so thanks.
You're so welcome. Okay, so we're gonna use Mercury. I mean, you don't have to. Like if Dan wants to use Mars, he could use Mars. So if you want to use a different healing spirit of a planet, go ahead. But so what you're going to do is you're going to think, like reflect on a situation, past event, an active situation, even like a potential of a situation happening again, because that's kind of what was happening today, right? So something didn't happen, but because of the past, that there was even like the slightest potential. We're training a new employee and on the printer, and let's just say there was a moment, right? So for Samantha, she would just reflect on that situation. So you reflect on whatever your situation is. And as you're reflecting on that situation, begin inhaling the healing spirit that you've chosen. And then just pause and let it go. Now, the best that you can, try to observe it in the body. And where do you feel it in the body? You're looking for where a loop is manifesting, right? So, where do you feel it in your body? And then you're observing it. And begin inhaling the oils as you observe. And then just pause and let it go. Now, I would say the more that you do work with different healing spirit oils, the more potent this next little piece becomes. So you're going to put your awareness on your back throat, the middle of the back of your neck. And then just take nice, long, slow, deep breaths. And then just pause. On that page. So the idea of like feeling it in the body or observing the situation, you're still trying to kick out of the intellect and bring in movement or the intuitive mind, right? The more that you develop that ability, because it's not really a technique, you're trying to develop an ability, right? And the more that that ability is developed, at some point, just going to the back throat will do volumes. But if you haven't practiced all those pieces and you haven't worked it for a bunch, going to the back throat, it'll do something. But the more that you've done it, the more that you've developed those areas and kind of worked it, then when you go to the back throat, oh, like it will really, really go deep, go really deep. So let's just have you be still for a moment. Go to the back throat again. Inhale the oil with your awareness on the back throat. And then just pause. How did that feel for you? Yeah. So when you're working the back throat, you're working both the brain and the body both at the same time. But anyway, We'll be doing more of that, but let's share some experiences or ask questions. And if you guys don't have any, we'll do a little bit more. But I wanted to kind of share this with you. It's not something you just start off with, but at some point, there's still little pieces that we add to it, but yeah, anyway. So you said like just layers feel like they're coming
Yeah,
off.
like the second, yeah. So when we first started and the body awareness or situational awareness, right? So we're aware of the situation. As soon as we were aware of the body, like it felt like my legs were shaking.
Mm.
And then, inhaling on the body, they calmed down. But when we did the back throw, it was like, felt almost like tar, like this, like thick layer. And then when we did the second round, it was like even stickier, heavier, like kind of starting to move. But it was,
Yeah, you're going deeper. Yeah. Yeah, good for you.
I don't think it's just about the printer.
Right. Yeah.
Someone said their forehead wants to play with the back throat.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, Greg, that was me.
Yeah.
What's you'd say a little bit about what that's about?
So at some point, the back throat and the back head and the forehead all kind of have like mm, like they kind of mix, and it's a much greater level of activation of the blue pearl. Much greater activation of the blue pearl. But I would say let it, if it's happening, and just let it kind of happen, like to stimulate it. I've known people to go crazy, like doing it, like, they weren't ready and they're like, I'm going to stimulate this, and they go at it. And so that it's happening, you can be aware of it, and you can even kind of cultivate it a little bit. But, had you like, not been doing all this, and then you go, I'm going to stimulate these things. You know, it'd be like riding a bunking bronco. Like if you pulled it off, good, but most times you get thrown off. And it can be kind of brutal. But as you kind of do it from the inside out, it's very gentle, and it just kind of unwinds, and because you're not stimulating, you're just facilitating, you know.
Have enough to be entertained by what
Yeah.
happens on the phone.
Yeah. And it will make the like clairvoyance, intuition, like the inner eye, it makes it much more like piercing with the kinds of things that it perceives and the information that it gathers up.
Someday. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
When you had us put our awareness on the body, first felt like the right side of my brain, and then it seemed more like the right side head, and then it went to the forehead, and then eventually my awareness kind of was pulled to the crown, which all seemed odd for a place in the body to be paying attention to, but that's what showed up.
Well, it could have been tied to actually that whole thing, like the forehead and the back throat, that probably was already in motion, because all of that would kind of play into that.
Okay. I was wondering if it had to do with a mental loop of something that was the situation I was focused on, but
Well, even when you look at the idea of the blue pearl or the inner eye, whatever we want to call it, is like part of, especially in the mind, how we break out of those loops is the stimulation of the blue pearl. But it brings in light, but it also breaks down the negative thinking or the repetitive thinking, and it basically purifies it. And so the more that particular area gets stimulated when you're thinking of these situations, the better. It's that idea. I'm surrounded by white light. only good comes to me, only good goes for me. It's the stimulation of the blue pearl, or the activation, I should say, of the blue pearl.
Thank you.
And a couple share questions. Is neck pain an indication to slow down the practice? It's not a new pain, just an area of awareness that came up.
No, no. No, I would say neck pain can throw off vagal tone a little bit. So I'd be, I'd treat it, but it's not necessarily an indicator of pumping the brakes unless it's causing like a headache or something when you're doing things, or, some sort of discomfort, but we all got something, you know what I mean? And so as long as you're able to practice through it, like I would do it, but I'd still treat the neck always needs work on everybody. But when we have a particular neck issue, then I would go deeper on it and work it a little harder.
Phew.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Does this strengthen the planetary energy or balance the body energies? For example, would one use Mars to strengthen fire energy or to balance it?
I would use it more for awakening consciousness, Um, I mean, it will have an impact on some of those things, but I would say it goes beyond how we perceive it intellectually, in those aspects. It goes much, much beyond that. And so that's what I would say about that. It does that, but more.
And I think that's the study group for the night.
Okay, you guys. Well, thanks for a nice session tonight. I mean, they're always nice, but it's kind of fun when we get to chat it up about the different things. And so we're going to move over to the mystic practice. If you have your Purba, the ones that are doing the mystic practice. And if not, happy 4th of July, and hope you guys have a good holiday weekend, and we'll be back on track on Tuesday. So